Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Susanna Karahanyan, President of INQAAHE, and it's my distinct honor and high privilege to welcome you all to this 30th anniversary event to celebrate an important milestone in INQAAHE's history. I want to thank you all for taking the time from your busy schedules to join us for this special and very special for all of us occasion. It is so wonderful to see and be in the company of so many friends, colleagues, QA community, and beyond. I wish we could have this event face-to-face, but due to apparent reasons, we are holding this online. However, this is the first event in a series of celebrations for the 30th anniversary, and we do hope at some point we will be able to meet face-to-face this year and celebrate it together. So let's start the celebrations now, and we will take it throughout the whole year. With all humility, I would like to add that what started as a modest project, vision of visionary academics back in 1991, has today become a global enhancement platform for all quality assurance providers in higher education, one that embodies the community spirit and ownership in its purest form. And this is a major achievement due to the key people that have been leading this network. And this is an incredible opportunity, an exclusive opportunity for all of us today to meet all the presidents that have been leading these organizations throughout the 30 years, the founding members also, and to be able to share the progress, the developments, the future prospects as well. Today, INQAAHE has over 350 members globally, and we have been working hard with the majority of our stakeholders, including majority of the governments globally that represented in our membership. Our aim has always been to stand by our members in pursuance of a better and enhanced higher education globally. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the panel today. And today we're having all the presidents, and you will see them in chronological order represented here. Unfortunately, we have lost one of them, Richard Lewis, who is no longer with us, and may him rest in peace. But all of our presidents are with us, and I'm happy that they are here and supporting us. Maybe Jacques will join a little bit later, but I'm happy to start to give the floor to the presidents to introduce themselves. It's time for everybody to know who are those people who have been in the backstage promoting the global quality assurance, and it's a unique opportunity, and I'm honored to hold this session. So I'm happy to give the floor to David Woodhouse, one of the founders of the network, to start the introduction and his address. David, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Susanna. Am I going to be able to see myself as well as the slide? Yeah. It would be helpful if I could, but if I can't, that's not a problem. Well, good evening in my perspective to you all, and morning, midday, afternoon, whichever it is for you all around the world. At INQAAHE's first conference in 1991, Malcolm Fraser, then head of the United Kingdom's Council for Academic Accreditation, said that the next decade will be the decade of quality. I was surprised at that statement. At that time, I'd only been employed in an external quality agency for a year, but I was doing my homework and getting up to speed in my new area, and I felt that QA was already widespread. But of course, he was right. The next decade saw a massive growth in the number of quality agencies, and this was supported and facilitated by INQAAHE. I was fortunate to be given the responsibility of helping to develop the network by seeking out, contacting new and emerging agencies and urging on them the merits of banding together for mutual learning and support. At the 10th anniversary conference in Bangalore in 2001, and I'm about to try and show you the logo on my shirt, because I can't see myself. I don't know whether I'm holding it in the right place.
Up, a bit up, David.
A bit up, how's that?
Super.
There you go. This is the shirt from 2001. And I foreshadowed that the next decade would be the decade of international quality. And so it proved. We had the growth of transnational education, and guidelines for this were put into INQAAHE's guidelines for good practice. INQAAHE fostered regional networks. INQAAHE facilitated and funded internships in other quality agencies. INQAAHE worked hard, but perhaps with less success, on mutual recognition by agencies of each other's decisions. With another 10 years, and at the 20th anniversary in Madrid, I foreshadowed that the next decade will be the decade of new models of QA. But I'm not sure that that prediction has come about. We certainly have had new factors in education. For example, more online education, massive open online courses, micro-credentials, etc. But the basic approaches to external and internal QA that were set up in the early years have proved very robust and able to deal with these new features. I'll perhaps say a little bit more about that in the discussions later. The problem, it seems to me, is not the models of QA, but the attitude of the quality agencies. It is always safer and easier to approve something that you know works than to stick your neck out and approve something novel for the first time. Hence, bureaucratic quality agencies can be forces for conservatism. Quality agencies are judging, pedagogic and research institutions and should have the skill to do this and not merely work from checking lists and ticking boxes. On the other hand, of course, quality agencies have often led the way, for example, with respect to learning outcomes, standards, and benchmarking, among others. My other thought on this is that whatever the QA game is in town, institutions will soon learn to play it. That's not always a criticism. Some institutions certainly try and game the system, but very often they simply are trying to learn what the quality agency is looking for and move to address it quickly, rather than looking at the underlying issues. But you know, that's no different to a student trying to work out what's going to be on the exam rather than really learning what the lecturer is trying to teach him or her. So EQAs need to be able to be variable, to be flexible, but of course, not moving the goalposts. Increasingly, quality agencies should treat institutions as equal partners and students as full participants. INQ has helped and will continue to help in all these things I mentioned. A look to the future. What should INQAAHE be doing? I think something that is outstanding is that we should tackle the difficult issue of corruption in quality agencies. If we agree that there's corruption in a lot of other entities in society, we can't possibly claim that quality agencies are the only structure or function that doesn't experience that in some places and sometimes and some ways. For some years now, UNESCO has worked with CHIA on corruption in institutions, and I think it would be useful for INQAAHE to work with UNESCO on corruption in quality agencies. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all.
Thank you, David. And your contribution to quality assurance globally is invaluable. I mean, it's impressive, very impressive. And thank you very much for being there and always supporting INQAAHE and all other quality assurance initiatives globally. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure.
And our honor to have you here. It's my honor to introduce the next president chronologically, Maria Jose de Maitre. Maria Jose, the floor is yours. And please unmute your mic so that we could hear you.
I was told this was going to happen. If I was muted, I'd forget. Well, thank you, Susanna, and thank you for the opportunity of being here with you and with this select group of former presidents and with the membership of INQAAHE. I haven't been able to attend the last conferences or forums, and I've missed it very, very much. But I attended most of them since 1993, so that makes me a very old member of INQAAHE. When we started in Chile and in Latin America with quality assurance, we didn't know what it was. We had to learn from scratch because there was a lot of mistrust on the idea that this would interfere with the autonomy of institutions, and that someone, the government, the agency, or whoever, was going to interfere with the questions that are vital to higher education institutions. We've had a long way and a load of work to overcome that suspicion. But in 2011, we made a study and understood and learned from vice rectors, from chairs of programs, from institution leaders, from students, from teachers, that quality assurance had been a really good improvement. It had helped them develop a number of important initiatives. And I think that that happened is in a very strong way the result and the impact of the INQAAHE experience, of learning from other people, of learning from other countries, of showing people how we developed and how we worked on self-assessment and external reviews and so on. So quality assurance was shown to have a strong impact on management and governance in the institutions, also to have a strong impact on teaching and learning by helping develop sound and concrete and effective learning outcomes, in helping introduce new pedagogical practices, in paying more attention to the outcomes of students. In general, it was a good thing. During my time as president of INQAAHE, we enjoyed the support of the World Bank, which was a really good thing because we managed to share and to have joint activities among us. We brought people from one agency to another to do internships. We helped people to come to the different conferences and forums. And I think it was a time which continued over Richard Lewis's presidency of a great activity supported by small contributions in terms of money, but a lot of help and a lot of enthusiasm from the membership. I think that this has been a very strong road we've gone through. We've put quality assurance in the center of the concerns of higher education. We've developed a culture of quality, or at least a culture of evaluation. But now we are in the middle of a great change, I'd say. It's not change, it's more of an earthquake coming from a country where earthquakes are frequent, at least one every 2 or 3 years. This is a strong moment in which we see that very much of the foundations in which we built quality in institutions is being challenged. We're looking at changes in terms of the student population, the diversity of institutions, the diversity of the new needs in terms of labor. How are we going to look at that? How are we going to address that from the point of view of quality assurance? One of the things I've learned in these years in quality assurance is that whatever an agency says becomes a strong incentive and a strong priority for institutions. As a joke, we would say if a quality assurance agency says that they like all doors painted blue, well, all institutions would paint their doors blue in a few months. So this gives us a very strong responsibility on the way in which we will be addressing the changes. But David said something, it's much more comfortable to go for the known, for the traditional, for things that we know it works. It's hard to make decisions that may be uncertain. But in that sense, I think COVID has pushed us and has made us conscious and absolutely aware that change is here, that we can't wait, that we need to address different kinds of needs and different kinds of students, that we need to address different modes of teaching and learning. So I would end by inviting all of us to look at what has been the experience of 2020 and learn from that in order to project it to a new way of doing things for institutions, for students, and for quality assurance. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose, and thank you very much for your incredible input into higher education quality assurance globally. Thank you very much. And it's my honor to present, to give the floor to Carol Bobby, who is the president with whom I directly worked already on the board before I became the president. So Carol, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everyone. I know it's evening for David and afternoon for some of you, but as we go through this seminar this morning, when I first signed on, which was earlier than all of you as participants, it was completely dark outside because it was very early in the morning. So you can see the rest of the sunrise as we go through this morning. I'm just honored to be here this morning with all of the people that I've known so long and that I met through INQAAHE. I probably would never have had a chance to meet Maria Jose or David or Susanna or JP or Jacques if it hadn't been for INQAAHE. So I know that in Maria Jose's slide, she talked about the preciousness of the friends that she's made. And I just want to echo what she said in her quote that was on her slide, because that's been something that's been very special to me. I want to take a little bit of a different tact because many of you know I'm here in Alexandria, Virginia. I've been part of quality assurance in the United States for 30 years. And until my retirement in 2017, I headed up an agency. And so there was a long history of quality assurance in the United States. We'd been doing it since the late 1800s in medicine, and since the early 1900s, they were looking at institutional quality through the accreditation system here. So why INQAAHE? What drew me to INQAAHE, and what kind of things was I looking for when I became a member of INQAAHE? Well, what really drew me to INQAAHE was knowing a very special person by the name of Marjorie P. Slynn, who, with David, was one of the founders of INQAAHE. And at that first organizational meeting where they put their heads together and created a new organization, and Marjorie had been a vice president of COPA, which morphed into CHIA, which is one of our recognition agencies here in the United States. And Marjorie was a forward thinker. So like all the founders of INQAAHE, they were really forward thinkers. And she was a good friend of mine, and she was constantly telling me, we have got to think bigger. We have got to think outside our borders. The world is changing. And boy, was she ever right. She knew that technology was going to change the very face of both business and higher education. And INQAAHE was a perfect solution for it, for higher education. The other thing Marjorie always said was that students came first. We needed to make sure that if people were going to be moving across borders, if education was going to be a tradable service, that we needed to be prepared to understand how quality was measured in different places. And again, INQAAHE was a perfect organization to take on some of those challenges. So the things I've appreciated about INQAAHE, it is truly an international organization. If you look at the membership and all the people that have been saying good morning, hello, good evening in the chat room, you're from all over the world. Its board of directors has always been truly international. And for many, many years, it had what I used to call a roving secretariat. So it would be located in different parts of the world. So that truly international flavor meant that it was a different kind of organization. It really was focused on members' needs from various regions, and those needs changed. They're so different in different places. You had the United States, which had a very mature accreditation system, but you had countries in the world that were just starting up. And so INQAAHE took it upon itself to always offer professional development opportunities for both types of systems, those that were just starting out and needed absolutely the basics of quality assurance, how to set up an agency, how to conduct a review, how to train visitors, to those that were more mature, that were seeking solutions to questions that were causing them angst at the time. And they've done that in a variety of ways through biennial conferences and fora. And I think the thing I always liked about that dual system of a conference one year that was open to everyone and a forum the following year, which was open to members, was that it really made it a very open organization dealing with lots of different ideas, bringing in new people, but then it hunkered down and said, okay, what are the needs of our members right now? How can we benefit you and provide you with guidance and service and answer questions and give you the connections that you need to make? And so I think that has been one of those offerings of INQAAHE that has been unique and really wonderful. I think the other thing that I've really liked about it is that INQAAHE has always provided the most creative networking opportunities. Again, I mentioned that it had a global focus, but it also helped to develop the regional focus too, connecting people that had things in common. And it could be socioeconomic regions, it could be cultural regions. And so there was a lot of flexibility in how regions could be set up. And I think those networking opportunities have been invaluable to helping quality assurance grow in different parts of the world. INQAAHE is generous. And I used to say sometimes when I was on the board, at least in my own mind, maybe it's generous to a fault because, trying to deal with a small budget with big global ideas can always be a challenge. But think about the things that INQAAHE has funded throughout the years, provides funding to conferences for individuals and countries that may not have been able to send anyone there. It has provided a scholarship program to train people in quality assurance that are taking coursework through QAP, the QAP program that was created by INQAAHE and then implemented by different universities. It's been generous with its timing, coming up with guidelines for good practice, training volunteers that then now can go out and bringing us up to today. We've got the Marjorie Peace Lens Center. I started with Marjorie and her influence on me, and her influence on INQAAHE was that INQAAHE now has a center, the Marjorie Peace Center for training. It's going to be looking at think tank issues. So the focus of INQAAHE needs to be what it's always been, and that is on its members, on the world, on the regions, on creativity and innovation. And I believe that INQAAHE is more than up to it. And I think that as we go through our discussion this morning and we look at the things that INQAAHE has done through different lenses, I think that we will be absolutely amazed and very proud to be part of this organization. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much, Carol. And I would like to thank you specifically for your generous contribution to the network. And I can't agree more with Carol. It's not only the president and it's not only the board, especially the board and a lot of experts that work with us, all our members that made this happen. And so many people working on the board on voluntary basis and contributing to it, just name them. I mean, they all brought, their part of success to this story. And I am really very grateful and extend my all gratefulness to all of them who started and supported this and still with us and will be with us. So it's my honor to give the floor to JP, Jagannath Patil, but we know him all as JP, to take the lead. JP, the floor is yours. And you have to unmute yourself because we don't hear you.
Thank you, President Susanna, and all the fellow presidents, and I would say extended family of INQAAHE spread across the world. Hello, hola amigo, guten tag, bonjour, privyet, salamat datang, adab, and namaste. So this is just a glimpse of a few languages that we get to hear when we as a family get united on every occasions of INQAAHE conference or INQAAHE forum, and which we, since last 1.5 years, which we are badly missing. So greetings to all INQAAHE family, to INQAAHE community on the 30th anniversary, an important milestone in the history of quality assurance of the world and also in the history of the INQAAHE itself. My association to INQAAHE dates back to 2005, when I, along with my colleagues from India, Dr. Anthony Stella and Dr. Prasad, participated in Wellington conference of INQAAHE, wherein I met all these stalwarts and giants of quality assurance fraternity. At that time, Marjorie Peaslane was very active. I remember Mala Singh was there. I remember, of course, besides David, we had Prem Naidu from the South Africa. So it was a dream come true for me for the first time when I joined that international gathering. And it was also an occasion where the first annual general meeting was held side by side of the Asia Pacific Quality Network. So INQAAHE has actually not just laid the mission of uniting quality assurance agencies around the world, but has given birth to various regional networks, and some of them which I have been very happy and fortunate to be the president for a long time. Asia Pacific Quality Network is the one. So there are many networks that are inspired and developed with the help of INQAAHE. That is one of the big contribution of the INQAAHE, I would say. And I think ever since that period, I have hardly missed any event of INQAAHE. Let it be an annual forum or annual conference, I have always been there. Not necessarily, I have been speaker many times, been the president in 2015 and 16. But besides that, just being there, interacting with the colleagues, making new connections, learning new things have been a great thing for me as personally. So personally, I always say that INQAAHE in itself is a dream of aspirations of quality assurance community to engage beyond the borders. So when I had opportunity to be the president, as the elected president, I presented a lot of dreams for INQAAHE, and I'm sure some of them are they are on its way. Particularly, I remember we all talked about a global quality assurance register in Fiji. And I think there are such dreams that every president has given, many colleagues have suggested. And I am sure in coming years, 30 years is not a very big span for the organization. It is a span of, it is now a period of maturity. I am sure in coming decades, as the things are unfolding in higher education scenario, INQAAHE would offer many such things, connecting people, being always in the forefront of, providing ideas, good practices, and the support also. So while not taking much of the time, but because we also have time for interaction, so I would just come to a very important point that really I want to say on this occasion of 30th anniversary. And in the wake of pandemic, when the physical distancing has been so much affected, none of the conference or forum of the INQAAHE, APQN, or any of these activities are not happening. So it is truly a moment of longing for me, and I am sure for many colleagues, when we remember our meetings the heated debates on many issues, and the laughters, and the sound of the claps that we hear, and also the hugs that when we meet or part, the hugs that we give, the kisses that we share. And also I fondly remember our very beautiful nights when we shared dance floor. So a day full of meetings, chattings, heated debates, and a wonderful night with the dance. I still remember in Taipei how I danced with my mariachis and Carol, and Tallinn evening, where a beautiful event was organized by colleagues at Tallinn on that historic boat, and where there was almost a Bollywood night coming through. And how to forget the events at Bahrain and Mauritius and Fiji. I think these are all the moments that we cherish, and we are launching beyond standards and excellence, and beyond all these things, the human connection, the sense of fraternity and the community that INQAAHE has been giving us. We are launching for that, and I look forward to see you all in person very soon. I wish all of you get vaccinated soon. Stay safe. Take good care of yourself, and let's hope to meet sooner than later. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, JP. This is a very inspiring talk, especially during this pandemic time when we do long to meet each other. And guys, everybody get prepared. In October, along with the UNESCO conference, World Conference on Higher Education, INQAAHE is also hosting its major event in Barcelona. So we hope to see you everybody there, where we will be announcing, opening officially our permanent secretariat. But we will be talking more about it in other events. But I do hope that we see each other and we meet face-to-face in October in Barcelona to celebrate 30th anniversary of INQAAHE and the permanent establishment of it. Thank you very much, JP. Thank you very much for all your contribution.
Welcome, Susanna.
Now it's like I came to the organization when that it's my turn now. It's my years of presidency. And I came to organization when it was already mature enough, well established, and I have been with the organization for the last 10 years in different capacities, like first co-opted member, then I moved to the fully elected member, then president, vice president for a couple of times, and then I was elected as president twice, and I think that I am the last president to be elected by the members, because now we have moved, as per the constitution, to a new election mode where you will be all electing the board, and then the board will be proposing the candidate for the president. So there are some changes that have taken place. Now, what happened during my presidency? I mean, whatever the founders and the leaders and the great minds behind INQAAHE were predicting, it did happen. As Maria Jose mentioned, it's not the earthquake, but the major disruption came in. And I'm using this term, Maria Jose, because it is a disruption in many regards. It's a disruption in the way the higher education is delivered. It's activation, overly activation of alternative education and how we respond to it. There are more directives coming from Sustainable Development Goals. There is a global recognition convention coming from UNESCO, which highlights quality assurance as the key. So there is a lot of expectation. I come to the presidency where there is a lot of more expectation from quality assurance, and then the organization INQAAHE needed to come to reimagine itself to actually be more sustainable and efficient. And launched already with the presidency of Carol Bobby. We have started thinking about establishment of a permanent secretariat. Like Carol Bobby mentioned, we have been moving throughout the globe and our members were bidding for us. But now we thought, no, we need to move to something we are mature enough to come up with a permanent secretariat. And my presidency basically took care of the sustainability and efficiency of the organization, INQAAHE as an organization. And also we have done a lot of work in quality assurance in content-wise, By the way, the launch of the global study, and you all, probably majority of you know this book that INQAAHE published last year. And this is with Brilliant Sense, and this is Global Trends in Quality Assurance. We started with the study. We looked into the systems globally in 7 regions all over the world to understand what their reasons are. And then we now reimagining and redesigning all our guidelines of good practice. We're redesigning our approaches to make sure that we're catering to the diversity of needs and diversification in the market. But we'll talk more about this. But what I want to say about INQAAHE, it's a very special organization to my heart. Majority of all of our presidents treated INQAAHE as their babies, and I do treat it as my baby. So I really am connected to it. I live with this, and I really highly appreciate all the membership is there and the membership support that we have been receiving so far. That has been incredible. Every now and then when I receive a message from any type, it could be negative, it could be positive, it could be neutral, but the communication with the members, the active communication with the members helped me and the board in guiding the network to where we are now. And I'm really happy to see that it has, it's strong enough, and we have enough potential to still lead all the developments and handle these disruptions, including the pandemic, which is the global disruption to everybody else. So thank you very much, everybody, for being there with us, and a lot of more things are to come. But now with this introduction, I'm happy, I want to open the floor for the discussion for our themes. And the themes we have prepared for you is throughout these years of quality assurance, and it's already more than a century. Like it started late in 19th century, and then in 20th century, and now it's in 21st century. So it's more than 120 years of history backing the quality assurance, starting from the US, and then in mid-60s, in 1960s, starting from UK, and then spreading all over the world. So what we have been doing is starting really with a very small scope of evaluations. And then what we have seen throughout the last 30 years is the scope to be expanding as the DNA of quality assurance was building and framing. So when we got with all the presidents together to discuss the scope of the discussion, we came up with, first of all, 3 E's, and then expanded to 5 E's. But then there are so many E's, and everything starts with E. And we have been trying throughout these 30 years, we have been adding the concept to the quality assurance that's shaping what it is that we expect from quality assurance. Yes, it deals with emergence, like we are currently dealing with not only pandemic, but emergence of any new thing, any new diverse provision in higher education. There is economics of quality assurance. How do we deal with that? Evaluation, enhancement, excellence, effectiveness, engagement, essence, efficiency, and it's also exceptional. So these are the terms that have been leading the discussion in quality assurance. And what the themes today will be covering is, if you go to the next slide, is what are the main evolutionary stages QA has been throughout the last 30 years, and INQAAHE's contribution in steering the development. Also, we want to see how these 10 E's emerged and what, in which way each of the concepts supported QA's contribution to the higher education performance and enhancement. So basically, we are there to support the enhancement. We are there as a global enhancement platform, and we, as quality assurance community, we are there to enhance our higher education systems. That's how this whole evolution supported it. Then also we are going to discuss about the future, what to expect. Like when INQAAHE was established, the founders were expecting that quality assurance is the future, and we have to be ready to handle the disruptions. And now the disruptions are there. What is next? And what should we expect from this? And with this, I am inviting all the presidents to start the discussion around these themes. But before that, I want to make a very special announcement. This is the first time we're announcing our INQAAHE new logo. And with the 30th anniversary, we are revising the whole feel and approach to our design and our organizational setup and branding. And I'm happy to introduce the INQAAHE logo. Now we have moved to 3 colors, and blue stands for education, purple stands for quality, and the silver we are using stands for high quality, high tech, and dynamism that is there to be expected from all of us. So we hope that this reimagined branding also is in line with what we are trying to reimagine and reinvent. And I want to give the floor to our presidents to start the reflections on these things. We will start with theme 1, and I open up the floor to the presidents. And by the way, if you have questions, please put your questions in the question and answers. We will be collecting the questions and then responding to them as they come. Okay, so.
Maybe we can follow the same sequence.
In this discussion, no sequence. Just come.
Okay.
Just come whenever you are ready, and whenever we start. But if this starts with the history and how this evolved and how the 10 E's emerged and shaped the quality. So, David, you want to take the lead?
There we go. I've just unmuted. Let me just have one go at question 1, and I'm sure we've all got contributions to each of the questions. And the question is, what are the main disruptions QA has been through? And one I would refer to is something I mentioned in my introduction, and that's transnational education. That was something to which INQAAHE had to respond, and it did in ways that I've suggested. Another that's come up is massification. The most great number of students going through the higher education system, and the consequent greater attention of other bodies, such as governments and other funders, to accountability. With more students, more money, someone's money is being spent on educating these students, and how do we know that that money is well spent? And hence the increased number of quality agencies, which were given different tasks in different countries and by different governments, and sometimes they were given incompatible tasks, and they had to work through it as best they could. But I think that what INQAAHE saw was that quality agencies need to do a very good job. They will be becoming more essential to the whole system, and they had to do a good job. And that's why we stressed professionalism and developed the guidelines of good practice, why we developed the postgraduate course to train people to do a job in QA. And we stressed that agencies had to be credible and they had to be independent. And we had many discussions from time to time on just what independence means. And I think we came up with some good guidance to agencies on this. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, David. Maria Jose?
Unmute.
One of the things that was sort of the big issue of discussion when I started attending INQAAHE conferences was the tension, the permanent tension between control and enhancement. John Freudenstein even published a book called Scylla and Charybdis about how much weight we would give to control and how much weight should go to enhancement, and how to balance these two things. And I think that one of the tendencies and the things that have been evolving are that we can loosen control, but still maintain a rigorous understanding of quality. And introduce enhancement more as the responsibility of the higher education institutions. So the evolution from this control versus enhancement as two opposite directions has been evolving towards a stronger concern with quality management, with the responsibilization of institutions about their own quality, with the development of strategies to strengthen and encourage self-regulation. And I think that has been a very significant move, or at least evolution is rather the way in which I put it. Now we're all discussing how to work on quality management, on the internal quality assurance, on issues of institutional research and how it supports the decisions institutions make for quality. And we're shifting from a culture of evaluation to a culture of quality. And thus we, I think, are making institutions more concerned with their self-control. That is one of the things that has struck me very strongly. As David said, issues such as massification, the diversification of the student population, the diversity of institutions, and how we need to go to accept that institutions and universities are not these organizations that have existed for any number of years. But now, higher education institutions are diverse. They have to respond to different needs, to different demands, and therefore we have a wide range of types of institutions. And that is a big challenge also for quality assurance, because of course we cannot evaluate a research institution with the same standards as we evaluate a teaching institutions or an institution that focuses itself on short cycle programs. Again, another important issue that we need to address is that of lifelong learning. In most countries, the student population in the traditional age group is diminishing. We have less students of 18 to 24 years old, but we have more people older who want to go back and attend different kinds of training, different kinds of formation. And we need to think about new degrees, new ways of new qualifications, new certifications. How are we going to do that and address that from the quality assurance side is also something we need to think about. And that has been increasingly present in the higher education sector, but also for the quality assurance agencies.
Well, I can't agree more with you, Maria Jose, and especially with diversification. And where you rightly mentioned a couple of times higher education institutions, but it's not, and also added that it's not only higher education institutions that have been diversified, but also higher education providers. As the economy grows, as the, with high-tech revolution, with all these disruptions in education, we see the prominence of alternative providers that come into market to close the gap that higher education is not able to, skills gap that higher education is not currently covering. So there is a huge army of industry representatives also offering skills and competencies in equivalent to higher education level. And how do we deal with this? As INQAAHE, we're currently revising the guidelines, and we're trying to come up with a framework for accreditation of guidelines of good practice for alternative providers, for quality assurance of alternative providers equally. I mean, we can't, when learning happens everywhere, and if we want this learning to be credited, and if we want this learning to be recognized or enhanced, then we need to come up with a solution which we are currently as an organization working on. And I see Carol having her hand over there. Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting how we can look at questions differently, and I agree with everything I've heard so far. But it sort of takes me back to, you know, what are the origins of some of these challenges or disruptions, as you may want to call them, and you know, because I had such a long career in quality assurance. I actually do remember the first time my agency opened an email account. So, you know, it throws me into the impact of technology on both what we do in quality assurance, because it has affected institutions so much. But, you know, that impact of technology goes even before the internet, because it really is what helped us to create global economies. It was how transportation and the movement of people across borders and students, you know, being able to sign up for classes online in different countries, and institutions picking up and creating a campus in another country, all started about. So I think of technology as one of those major points of disruption that quality assurance really had to grapple with. I mean, really had to grapple with. And it's one of the things that caused the massification of higher education and the global campuses that we needed to start looking at, and the distance learning issues and the MOOCs. I remember when MOOCs came out, and it was the buzzword of a year, you know, and I still hear people talk about MOOCs, but not too often anymore. But it was like, what are we going to do about the MOOCs? What are we going to do about the MOOCs? But during that process of the technology revolution in higher education, there were some other things that were going on. And there was a huge, because of economic issues going on in different countries, there was a call for more accountability. And so many countries already had governments highly involved in quality assurance. But in the United States, for instance, the government had been more hands-off. But when the accountability movement and quality assurance, like show us what you do, how you do it, and why you're effective, because we're not so sure about it. I think that set off a whole nother realm of disruptions, because all of a sudden our list of constituents that we needed to answer to, it wasn't just the institution and peer review anymore. It was really that quality assurance had to be accountable to students asking questions as they knew more about quality assurance, to governments, to employers, and we still are dealing with that. And I think still quality assurance sometimes doesn't know how to deal with that very well. So those are the kinds of disruptions that I also think have played a huge role. And in the middle of all of those two big things going on, we had other little revolutions going on, like the creation of international ranking systems, which was a challenge to quality assurance, because we were used to being the ones that were saying whether this was a good program or not. Now, all of a sudden, we had self-report surveys and magazines and groupings of individuals coming up with rankings. And that, I think, was a major disruption in terms of trying to get people to understand what we did better. So communication, we really had to begin to deal with how we represented ourselves and how people understood what we did. And those conversations are still happening. So some of these disruptions have had, I think, ripple effects that I've seen going on for 20 years. And of course now, and we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge it, although we don't have to focus on it, the results of the pandemic, and what does that mean for moving to fully online versions of quality, and when will we know what differences it has made? So, and countries that maybe can't get people to provide services to them during the pandemic. So there's the disruptions are many, but those challenges are the exact things that make us evolve, make us be innovative, make us look at how we do things and do them differently and hopefully better. So that's why these discussions are so important. I always want to say these are important discussions. They're not things we can't overcome.
Yes, JP.
Yeah, just 2 minutes to reflect on this theme from the perspective of where I come from, India, and also from the Asia Pacific. These 30 years, actually, barring some exceptions like Hong Kong and the Philippines, this initial period was period of existence and emergence of QA bodies in the region. Most of the quality assurance agencies in Asia Pacific, as I said, with these 2-3 exceptions, they are born in the 90s. So this was the period for each of these organizations to evolve. And one critical challenge was to make higher education community accept this very concept of external quality assurance, because this concept of external quality assurance itself has been very new in this region, and it took many years in some countries for higher education sector to accept, there is something like external quality assurance agents and they will come and review you. So I think this was one challenging part of this first decade, I would say. And the next, and in this very period, we saw, because it was such a new concept, there was a lot of exchange happening between some developing countries, some developed countries. I remember exchanges between Mauritius and India, Mauritius and South Africa and India, with Cambodia, with Nepal, with Taiwan. So many, and every time there was something to learn from how we are resolving these issues that we are facing. So these initial periods were this evolution and learning and exchanges. And as Carol was rightly saying, the current phase is to embrace the technological advances. The technological advances have completely revolutionized the entire higher education industry, as it is called now, with all those micro credentials, those MOOCs, and those meta degrees, double degrees, and this pandemic has only pushed the agenda of online education further. So I think all those things, I think we need to catch up now. So the current challenge for, I think, not just developed QA bodies, also for developing QA bodies, is to catch up with the higher education evolution. It is no more evolution now. It is kind of a revolution taking place in higher education, and that we are trying to catch up. That's what my take about this theme. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. And as I hear the discussion, like throughout this year of evolution and now where we are now, it seems like access and inclusion to higher education has become a major issue nowadays. We have to address, and when we talk about access and inclusion to higher education, we don't only mean higher education institutions and the qualifications that come out of higher education institutions, but also the education acquired, and how to include and how to provide access to higher education and formalize the education which otherwise is obtained. We know that all these big companies, that Google and name it, Microsoft, they don't even look at qualifications. So they are accepting the employees already without qualification, as long as you have the right skill, as long as you have the right competencies, and as long as you are the right person, then you are hired. So given this trend, a major boost in micro credentials in offers coming from industry is there. And this makes them excluded from higher education itself, because their qualifications might not be, or their skills might not turn into end up in a qualification, or might not be recognized. So there is a recognition issue that is raising there. And since we have been also dealing here in this part of the world with the new initiatives coming and coding schools opening that come from the industry, our interest is also how to make higher education more inclusive, how to work on the inclusion and increase access to higher education. And this is where quality assurance folks and quality assurance bodies and quality assurance professionals have to step in and come up with a solution. Because currently, as you rightly mentioned, there are a lot of government authorities, government quality assurance bodies. Well, they have their strict agendas on how to deal with higher education. And until the strict agenda is changed, then the alternative education and the access and inclusion of those who got the alternative education will be limited. So until everything else is changed, until we come up with a solution. You as president, as with all rich experience, how do you see this challenge of inclusion and access to be handled by quality assurance people? What would be your guidance? Yes, David.
You just made, in a slightly different way, a point I think I was about to make. You're talking about the various entities that have views on how these institutions should operate. And I was coming at it from the other way. And I was going to say, it's right and proper that INQAAHE has discussions about how quality agencies can approach these different types of education. But we can contribute to the conversation, but probably will not be the bodies defining these types of education and defining what's expected of them. Maria Jose said that she wanted to move from quality assurance to quality, and I define quality as always as fitness for purpose. And so the prior question is what's the purpose? So if you have different institutions doing different things, they must be able to specify what it is they are trying to do, if they have the autonomy to do this, or there must be an external body saying what they are supposed to do. And when that has been spelled out, then a quality agency stands some chance of saying, yes, you are achieving what you're supposed to be doing, or not, as the case may be. Just a couple of brief examples. When I was in Hong Kong, that was in the early 90s, our task then was to review institutions against a very nebulous concept, international comparability. That was all the guidance we were given. And I remember we were halfway through the first sequence of reviews when the head of the open and distance institution came to us to make sure that we would be able to understand how his institution was different and deal with it appropriately, and we were able to reassure him that we could do. And I had a rerun of that when I went to New Zealand in the second half of the 90s. The head of the open and distance institution said that she was tired of having to explain to every group of officers from the Department of Education just what was different about distance education. And I convened a small group that produced a little booklet that effectively said, if you're looking at quality in the distance and online institution, these are the sort of things you look at. They're similar to what you know about in face-to-face institutions, but a bit different, and you have to adapt them. And finally, a current anecdote. A lot of you know Stella, who was a former president of APQN, my partner, and now we've got into growing walnut trees. She's doing an PhD in a disease of walnuts. And the university at which she's studying has put her name on something called, I think it's ResearchGate, which sort of opens her to researchers around the world. And so she gets requests for research publication. Now, of course, she doesn't have any in this new area now. But what did she get? She gets requests for QA publications. And when she sends it, she says, but this is from 2006, 2007. And the people say, but it's still exactly relevant to what we're trying to do now. That's it.
Thank you very much, David. I see Carol's hand, and we take another 5 minutes, and then we go to respond to the questions which we have already accumulated there. Carol?
So I want to pick up on the first part of David's reaction, which had to do with, the coming at it from QA has the right to look at the issues, but ultimately the institutions are going to be involved, and we're going to, as QA agencies, have to adapt and find ways to deal with some of the new situations. And I basically agree with that statement. And because that is also our purpose. Our fitness for purpose is to assure the quality of education as it's being presented in the context of whatever the societal needs are, et cetera. So there's going to be evolution that goes on in both places. But I think sometimes that there are instances where QA has very effectively taken the lead. And the example that I'm going to give has to do with when in my country, in the United States, when we had a pretty sharp rise in completely online distance education programs, and it was fairly new and whatnot. One of the things that we found just in our own office, a specialized accrediting agency, was that I could go to the website where the students were to get their information, and I could never reach out directly to the faculty if I was a prospective student. And so what happened was, if they wanted to get information on this institution, they had to go through somebody that was more or less considered an advisor or somewhat like a sales rep, and so you didn't really have access to the faculty, and you could find out very little about the curriculum without going through that initial stage kind of thing. And so one of the things that CHIA tackled early on was transparency issues on a variety of levels. But one of the things that the QA agencies, in order to stay recognized, needed to do was to actually maybe apply some pressure. And so I think that was an area where QA agencies could take the lead in helping to assure that there was quality across the board. So it wasn't reactive to the institution's needs, it was reactive to the societal needs. And so I think that interplay is necessary and needs to go on. And I think it's one of the ways that we can be most effective in disruptions is to always keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening out there. So I'll break it there.
Absolutely agree. Maria Jose?
I like the fact that Carol mentioned about quality assurance agencies taking the lead, because in many cases, they can stop all innovation if they are not aware of societal needs, of new population, of students' needs. One of the things that we've been working on in my organization is to develop a concept of quality that links the identity of the institutions, their principles, their priorities, in order to define what we call their significant territory. Where are they going to operate? What kinds of students they're going to deal with? What kinds of areas of knowledge? What kinds of levels of teaching and learning and so on? What kinds of the relative weight of their functions and so on? That's their identity. Then we look at their relevance. And so how do they address the needs and demands from that territory, from that specific territory? And then how do they organize their resources, processes, and outcomes to the purposes that emerge from their identity and from their needs of their territory? If quality assurance agencies do that, they make institutions responsible for their own definitions, because sometimes they say a lot of things which they can't do, or they don't pay enough attention to the needs of the people or the disciplines or the regulations that they have to take into account. So I think that working with the institutions in order to make them responsible for developing their purposes in a very realistic way would helps the agency then come back and evaluate the institution. But the quality assurance agencies there have a strong responsibility in encouraging responsible innovation, but also in making sure that they don't prevent innovation. One of the rectors of an institution, when we interviewed them, said, well, quality assurance is paralyzing. We don't dare do things because then we would not get accredited. And since accreditation is becoming more and more important, then quality assurance agencies can become paralyzing. So this constant review of what are the societal needs for higher education have to be included in the DNA of quality assurance, because they have a very strong role in leading institutions and not paralyzing them.
Well, Maria Jose,
Take 1 minute,
this is
1 minute only.
Yes.
Just 1 minute. I know we are
Yes,
little
please,
running
JP.
late. Yeah. This was one another two important E's that I wanted to mention that, to me are very dear, and I'm glad that you touched upon that issues of inclusion and equity. So I think as you know that equity is at the core of the UN Sustainable Development Goals also. And therefore, I think that any talk of quality without without equality is also futile. So because educational inequality is mother of all inequalities. That is point number one. The second point is excellence without equity can also be a recipe for unfair society. And therefore, I have said that, we need to promote as the leading network, we perhaps can promote equity with excellence and quality with equality, so that equilibrium is maintained by those promoting these concepts at the national levels and the regional levels. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, JP. Very nicely stated. And I was also going to make reference to what Maria Jose just recently said about paralyzing institutions. As our global study demonstrated, like for the last 30 years, and we already discussed that, and majority of the networks were basically majority of the agencies were established in 90s and 2000s. And as they came to their maturity level now, it's really time for them to revamp the agenda. Well, what we have seen in the study that predominantly the quality assurance systems in majority of the countries lead to compliance, which in its turn is a problem it's an easy route to paralyzation of the system. So, and innovation. So compliance, while it's good, we have to revise it. It's not only all about compliance. There should be robust accountability, but not in the form of blind compliance that leads to paralyzation of the system and just stopping all types of innovation. This is something that majority of the systems show that are suffering from. So how INQAAHE could be of support is setting the frameworks for those agencies to promote, to work more on enhancement, to deal more with the enhancement element of it. And enhancement, by saying enhancement, I don't only talk about the quality assurance activities that could enhance the system, but also a robust accountability system that allows autonomy, innovation, and new developments in the system while having the accountability to keep the equilibrium there. So I think that there is a huge work to be done there, and there is a lot of contribution that is coming from INQAAHE. And I would like to start already taking the questions now. But before that, I would say that, for the last 30 years, we would take that this has been the period where majority of the quality assurance agencies established and systems established themselves. And now they're all mature enough to evolve in their own way to contribute to the society, to the economy they belong to. Majority already started doing it, but there are systems that are in the process, and this is the unique platform for them to learn and to be with. So there are questions that are coming, and the first question that I saw was about corruption, and that was specifically addressed to David. So how would you deal with corruption? And I guess I would expand the question, corruption not only in education, but also in quality assurance. So could you please talk more about this?
Well, I certainly don't have the answer. Well, you said, how would you deal with corruption? I don't pretend to answer that question in the next 2 minutes. And I did mean corruption in quality assurance, that's right. Obviously, I won't mention context, but a head of a quality agency said to me once, some years ago, that they were tired of getting a phone call from the Ministry of Education, as a high-level person in the Ministry of Education, saying, this institution will be accredited, full stop. Someone had gone behind the scenes. In another country, I know of an institution that passed its accreditation, but it's never going to be formally accredited because it has fallen foul of the government in a certain way. Now, those are just 2 examples that I know of. But the point I was making was that most organizations in most countries, no, maybe that's wrong, many organizations in many countries show corruption, fraud in some form or another. In the recent issue of INQAAHE's journal, Quality in Higher Education, Lee Harvey has an introductory article on research fraud. Even people who are expecting to do things as well as possible and guide other people fall prey to this from time to time. And my point was simply that it would be good if we would accept, as many institutions have, that there's corruption in some institutions and there should be ways of dealing with it. We at INQAAHE should accept that probably in some quality agencies there is corruption. Now, it's an immensely sensitive topic, and I don't know just how you would deal with it, but I think a starting point will be a small group with representatives from the board and perhaps from outside to try and set down some parameters of how you might investigate and look at things. Certainly I saw, well, I'll stop there. I could just keep going on. I've said as much as I can helpfully contribute there.
Thank you, David. Maria Jose?
Corruption operates in many ways, sometimes through even the same members of the commission or the agency that have special links with the institutions, that pay more attention to sort of off-the-record discussions. So I think that there is something that needs to be addressed very strongly in terms of something David mentioned before, which is the professionalization of quality assurance. All professions have their ethical rules and norms. I think for quality assurance, it is very important to spell out those ethical rules that one may think it's obvious, but it's not always obvious. When the president of a committee goes and pays more attention to the discussions in an institution and then comes back and says, oh, this institution is great because they work beautifully. Well, that's not adequate. So I think that the need to professionalize and to increase the ethical norms for the members of the agency who make decisions, but also for the technical staff who again can also interfere, or it's not only imposition from the government or from authorities, but also within the agency. And I think that for that, professionalization is a very important step.
Yes, Carol? Thank you very much, Maria Jose.
I just want to second what both David and Maria Jose have said. I hadn't really thought about it before, but I think that you're right, professions do. They have their ethical standards and their standards of practice. And we have, in some ways, the framework for standards of practice with our GGP. They really sort of spell out what we expect in quality assurance agencies, but it would be good to just put that out there. We've talked about how QA has been a professionalizing profession for a number of years, and maybe that's just the next step.
Well, I can't agree with all of you more, but I mean, let's remember what happened to INQAAHE's project about on quality assurance, on corruption, on integrity. We called the project integrity, and we were planning to apply for European Union. And this is such a sensitive topic. Well, we had a couple of plans to set up a framework for evaluation of the systems, which would then generate reports of the risk areas. And that was a very well thought through project. And we almost got to the very end of the project was strongly written, but then the countries that were invited, the questions that they were raising, like, are we recognized as at risk? That is why we are in the project. So the sensitivity of corruption and being involved in a project to explore corruption is very serious. I know that CHIA has done a great job setting principles for integrity and how to fight with corruption, and this is an incredible help. But how to turn them into a framework that would support the systems and yet consider the sensitivities and not to compel the governments out of or the systems out of this overall movement. Well, still things are in development, and we will be working together to come up with solution. But the main thing that we are there thinking about it and working on it is just the modes of operation, modes of delivery, and modes of development that need to be put in a way that the sensitivity and the global sensitivity, and dealing with 7 regions in the globe, we have to consider all the cultural sensitivities also. So this is really very important. Like, now I have gone through the questions, and the most burning question there, I would say everybody is concerned about online education, the quality assurance of online education, and especially given the pandemic, the online quality assurance. So what would your reflections be? Now, we know that for the last year, we all have been paralyzed and we are operating in an online mode. As per statistics, 60% of the, it's only 60% of the students that can enjoy the, avail themselves of this luxury to have full, education, online education. There is a lot of students who are actually deprived of it, and the systems that are deprived of online education. There is a major blow on the system, on the higher education system, and especially on the quality and the quality assurance too. For the last year, I don't remember that. Maybe in very few countries and in very few cases, we identified some face-to-face site visits, but predominantly they were all done online. And we all acknowledge that neither the higher education institution, nor the quality assurance, and nor the high-tech developments and solutions are now ready to face this massive online delivery in many regards. So what would your reflections be in online education, in quality assurance of online education and online quality assurance?
Let's start, Susanna.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I was just much before the pandemic came, I just want to cite experience of my agency in India, INQAAHE. We went fully online. In 2017, we went fully online with all the quality assurance processes except the part component of the visit. Everything has been put online. And I think there are many agencies now moving to that with the advent of technology and new tools and with increased focus on outcomes-based education rather than inputs. There is now a growing demand that most of the things can happen online. And there are successful examples where the traditional QA also is being done online. So wherever there is online delivery or other flexible modes of delivery, I think there are already good practices existing, and perhaps by sharing those practices, we can learn from each other. And obviously, I think this is the time. Obviously, there is no replacing of the peer element in this entire process, because I think all the seniors would agree here that one of the fundamental of this quality assurance process was peer review. The experience and the insights and the reflections that come through the peer system has been a driving force of this entire system. But now that world is moving to more quantitative, more benchmark-led, and technology-driven processes of assessments, we also perhaps need to make a shift towards that without compromising the value of the traditional QA. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. And I see Carol raising her hand, and then David. Yeah.
It's interesting. Online education has been around for a long time now, and I agree that we have good examples of best practices, but a lot of institutions had to very quickly move online, and all the quality assurance agencies I know had to very quickly move online in terms of at least visits, even if all their other practices like submissions and things were being done online before that. And so I just commend the higher education institutions and the quality assurance agencies for the flexibility that I think that they've shown under pretty dire circumstances. I mean, one day the world was open and the next day the world was pretty much shut down. And so life went on and quality assurance reviews have gone on. I think the jury is going to be out. I think that there's going to be a lot of research that gets done on this. I think that there will be a lot of reflection. People will begin to look at what worked well and what didn't. But in just my own personal discussions with people that are directly involved, that have like chaired site visits at institutions or been on site visits looking at professional programs, people that have been running agencies, they feel that overall that some things have gone very well, but we don't necessarily know what we don't know at this point. So I think what I keep hearing from people is that one of the things that this experience will do as we reflect upon it is to determine whether or not a new model might evolve that would be a hybrid model. And we've had other examples of that in the past. When we talk about risk-based accreditation, we talked about how, okay, there might have been a full blown site visit for the first visit or even the second visit, as people went through their cycles. But for those institutions that had a track record, maybe they could move to a hybrid model of some kind where they could look at certain things based on outcomes. And so I think there's a lot of information that we'll glean from this that can help us to look at quality assurance in new ways. I think that could be hopeful. I think people will find that this was both a time-saving and a cost-effective measure if the outcomes are the same. And again, I think a few years ago, we really in INQAAHE we're focusing on the effectiveness of quality assurance. And it was an accountability look at quality assurance, like how can we tell people that we know that we're effective and that we're making a difference for these employers or for this government or for this student or whatever. And we'll be asking ourselves the same question. It's really going to come down to, was it as effective? And if it's not, then what do we do with that information? So, but I think that it's been a very interesting forced research project.
Well, David, just one comment before I give the floor to you, because there was a question about moving on to the outcome-based approach from the inputs to outcomes. I think that whatever Carol has just mentioned, this effectiveness is something, is the one of the E's that actually drives us into outcome-based approach. And this is what we have been advocating already for years. Like, inputs and processes are fine, they should be there, but what matters actually is the outcomes, is the effectiveness, and we all should be concentrating or maybe revising the systems to make sure that we are working on effectiveness. As the global study demonstrated, predominantly one of the major problems in the systems now is the standards, which are predominantly input-based and process-based, but don't allow measurement of the outcome. So this is something that the systems need to take as a guidance in their revision of their systems. And David, the floor is yours.
And before I go back to the open learning, just commenting on what you've just said, we've been dealing with that for 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years ago, we were saying institutions need to move from input measures to output measures. Oh yes, you've got all this money, you've got all this stuff, but how good are your graduates? And so I sympathize with the questions that came up there in the chat. And it does sort of reinforce my belief that some of the things that, well, maybe I'm wrong. Some of the things that we've been doing all along are still relevant. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the things we've been doing all the time still haven't worked and we better do something different. But going back to the question about online education, two totally different questions about online education and online QA. And I do think that by and large, we know how to review, accredit, check, audit online education. I know things change quickly and have perhaps changed even more quickly during the last year for various reasons, but I think we can keep up with them. One question there said, how should accreditation agencies deal with online institutions, particularly for accreditation which is geographic in nature and the online institution borderless? Well, we have been doing that for some years already. And first step is to try and go back to where the center is. Who's responsible? Who's the basic headquarters, if you like, of the online organization? Who carries the can? Who gives the credential that the students come? First of all, you go after that structure or organization and you spread out from it if you have to. And lots of other examples. Moving to online QA, I do think that in the fullness of time, when the world has perhaps resumed its circle around the sun in its normal way, we may well go back to having site visits, because, as you know, I'm a firm believer that testing out what you've been told by interaction is very important. But look how much interaction we managed to do this year through Zoom. It may be that we do that a lot more, because it's not cheap to fly in half a dozen people from around the world on a couple of occasions. And so I've certainly appreciated the ability to have interaction with colleagues via Zoom that I wouldn't be able to see so often if I had to pay for it. So, but there are other ways, I think, of getting around it. If we're still thinking of this rather odd situation, if I'm responsible for reviewing an institution in a distant country, even if that country is locked down, there may well be people I can engage in that country to do the actual visit to the institution in that country. So I think we use online forms more often because we've got more used to this Zoom and being able to do things, and we think of other creative ways of getting around any barriers. And we may well keep going with those after things return to more normal, because it's more economical, one of our E's.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. And I just, by closing, I can't help referring to a question that was raised. How do we deal with quality assurance in conflict zones? And this is something that, again, deals with inclusion. And INQAAHE being an inclusive organization, this is something that we really very much care about. In terms of quality assurance of conflict zones, how do we deal? Usually we have been receiving a lot of communication coming from different parts of the globe where accreditation, not international accreditation or any type of accreditation, is not yet available. And each case is special. Each case has its specifics. And then we deal with each case specifically, but we're always there to support and enhance. So anytime in terms of any issues, we are there ready to consult and to support the countries that are in conflict zone and need to deal with enhancement of their systems. With this, I would like to conclude, and since this is our celebrations, I want to give the floor to each of the presidents to make a wish just for INQAAHE, say something, you know, that would make our days nicer and our celebrations better and make us really very happy. So we start again in chronological order, wishing happy anniversary, 30th anniversary to INQAAHE and to all our members. David, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm stealing a phrase that's been used here in Australia. Always was, always will be. And I'm applying it. It was in Australia, it's been used by indigenous population last year. I'm applying it to INQAAHE and saying INQAAHE always was supportive of quality agencies and it always will be.
Thank you. Maria Jose, your phrase about INQAAHE, your wish, and your mic is muted.
Okay.
The wish.
My wish for INQAAHE is to go on, but also to innovate and be able to change and learn, and also to unlearn.
Thank you. Carol, your turn.
Okay, well, as they say at Nike, just do it.
Super. JP.
Yes. My wish is, because I spent 1 year recently in Japan, I wanted to communicate that feelings in their way of looking at the things. So I would like INQAAHE to discover or rediscover its ikigai. The ikigai is purpose of life. So engage with everyone and rediscover the ikigai. That's what my wish for INQAAHE.
Super, thank you. And we are always here with you and for you. And with this, I wanna make a wish. My candle is not visible, but there is a candle. I have happy 30th anniversary. JP, where is your candle?
Yes. Yeah. I have five cakes. Right?
Wow.
Specially
Okay.
made for the occasion by my kids.
Happy 30th anniversary.
Happy 30th anniversary. Long live INQAAHE. Long live QA community.
And thank you very much, everybody, for this very beautiful experience. We do hope to see you all in October in Barcelona, face to face. Happy 30th anniversary to INQAAHE. Thank you very much, everybody. And see you all soon.